from FAR, or Micah? I know you're here, Micah Robbins. Okay, Micah, you're representing. So DCF, we have a number of people from DCF. Please introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Amber Williams, and I am with DCF. I am the subject matter expert for CORE and for Hospital Bridge.
Thanks, Amber.
Hey,
Good afternoon.
I'm Assistant Secretary for the Office of Quality and Innovation.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kai Bigelow, Director of Operations for the Recovery Research Network Foundation in Palm Beach County.
Okay, thank you for that. Jeff Lynn, attorney.
Hi, I'm here.
I see you there, Jeff. Okay, Nancy McConnell, CEO, Rebel Recovery. Nancy? Neil McGarry, Florida Certification Board, FCB. Neil, are you with us? Okay, Dr. Moran, Robert Moran, Center for Recovery. Dr. Moran, you with us? I think your microphone might be a little... Okay, Dr. Needle, Rachel Needle. Dr. Needle, are you with us?
Jesus.
Okay.
Al, I think Nancy may be jumping on later, but Austin Wright is here for Rebel.
Okay, thank you. Houston Park, I saw you're here from
Good afternoon.
Hi, Houston. Terrell Pyburn, Coconut Creek City Attorney. Terrell.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Terrell. Susan Ramsey, attorney. She's also pro bono for FAR. Susan.
Hi.
Terry Shapiro, VP GIA Invited Recovery. Terry.
Present.
Hey,
Good afternoon.
Nikki Soda, I saw you earlier. You're no longer with the Kennedy Forum. What are you doing? Oh,
I'm still work with him. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. I've got you down as Kennedy Forum. Okay.
Yeah.
Dr.
Present.
John, hi, Nikki. Dr. John Semenides of FSAM. Dr. Semenides, are you with us? Okay. Alton Taylor, Drug Abuse Foundation. Jan Toman, Project Opioid South Florida. Okay, Dr. Lori Vinicor, I saw you're here. Lori.
Yes, here. Good to see you all.
Good to see you as well. Greg Weiss, Commissioner, Palm Beach County County Commission. Greg, are you with us, Mr. Commissioner? Nils, are you with us on your staff? Okay, we'll contact them, see if they're getting on. Okay, thank you. Richard Worms from Office of the Attorney General.
Good afternoon. I am here, sir. Get my camera going for when I'm needed, if needed. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Well,
Sure.
Eric Urlano, Integrity Billing. Okay. Welcome everybody else from the public. I'm going to launch right into stuff. First, let's discuss some of the Palm Beach County numbers, if we can get them up on the slide up on the screen.
Give me a second.
Okay. There we go. Now, this is stats in the middle of the year, especially for our medical examiner. It's like using a Ouija board. It's very hard to determine what the ultimate numbers are going to be. It appears that we're tracking around a little bit below last year's numbers, which is great because we had the lowest numbers that we've had since 2016. Actually 2015, I believe. But anyway, the numbers that we had last year at this time of the year, which is through July of 2024, those are set in stone, those are firm. So we had at this time 330 overdose cases. 259 were opioid, which is 78%. That's been similar for the last couple of years of the total overdoses. But the fentanyl in the opioid ODs are 94%, 243. That was last year again. I know it says through July 24, but that should be through July 23. And the decline that we had was around 6%. We've been going down steadily for the last several years. And this year, there are 208 pending cases. So we don't even know if those are overdoses. They're suspected. The total overdose numbers are 208 right now, which is well below, again, last year, but last year has every overdose factored in. So there's a projected 406 potential for 416. The rate of opioid OD cases to the total drug overdoses this year is very low, 58% at 121, which is way below. This will bring us 6% below last year. Is a projected 242 for this time of the year for the first 7 months. So that would be a decline of 6%, but again, the 208 pending cases could swing anyway. It might be again like last year, 78% of OD cases, which would mean we'd be up a couple of percentages. The xylazine is down this year for this time of the year. Again, we don't have all the cases counted. So, lastly, fluorofentanyl seems to be down as well. Now, apparently, I read an article out of New York that there's a new monster drug, zombie drug, whatever you want to call it, medetomidine, which is 100 as carfentanil is 100 times more potent than fentanyl. I will say that according to our medical examiner, last year we had 13. At this point, we had 13 carfentanil overdoses, and we're down to 3 this year. That's good news that there's less carfentanil in the population. Moving over to the next slide. The numbers are, again, trending down. These are the transports for Palm Beach County Fire Rescue, which is roughly 50% of the transports in Palm Beach County. We do have a number of individual municipalities, such as West Palm, Boca, Palm Beach, with Riviera with their own fire rescue. But roughly 50% of fire rescue responses are Palm Beach County. We're down to the lowest numbers we've ever had, which is great news. Another 15% drop at this time of the year, reflecting a 66% reduction in suspected drug overdose transports to hospitals in Palm Beach County through 2017 to 2024. So those are the current numbers. Any questions on any of this so far? Okay. Next is an update for FAR, and I guess Micah, you're going to be taking that. You can get this up on our screen.
There we go. Sorry to be on mute. Get me on camera here. There we are. We're going to pull that up.
Okay, so you're going to share screen, okay? Or are we going to?
Well, no, I'm not sharing screen. I sent it over to Mary Ann, but I have.
It's coming up.
You got it. I got mine in front of me.
All right.
There we go. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and things, of course, moving right along in recovery housing. As you can see, as through July, total units, this is statewide, 1,946, and just under 10,000 beds at 9,497. The level 1, 2, and 3 at 6,024 beds, and of course our level 4, 877 units, 3,473 beds. If you start looking through counties, of course, Broward and Palm Beach still lead the charge by a wide margin. Broward County, our neighbors to the south, with 622 units, over 2,800 beds in Broward County. I'll do some more statewide in a second, but just again, comparison with Palm Beach County, where the bulk are in the state of Florida, 794 units and 3,598 beds. If we start looking around the state, it's interesting is that we have some trending numbers where we also see some trending information when it comes to usage. Not that it correlates, but just an interesting tidbit. Over in the West Coast, if we look at Pasco, Pinellas, and Sarasota, those areas, Hillsborough, we're starting to see a lot more programs come online. So with 170 beds, Pasco, Pinellas, 295, Polk, which is right, that's that little tiny one as you're heading west towards there. We even have 14 in Polk right now, and in Hillsborough with 433 beds in that area. So we're starting to see a lot of growth there. Treasure Coast, Space Coast as well, with Brevard now up to 192 beds, and as well as some work we're doing in the Treasure Coast. And we look at Space Coast, Treasure Coast as kind of a unit. And in St. Lucie, we're at 91 units. And Martin County at 128. So we're actually starting to see an increase in certified beds there. And we're doing a lot of work in the Treasure Coast. We're getting a lot of word about uncertified houses there. Guys, we're getting a lot of word about uncertified houses across the state as we are now getting a much broader footprint and contact around the state with FAR. So we are casting the net far and wide, no pun intended, to not only bring folks up to speed on all the regulations, as we know, but also some folks that maybe had not been FAR certified before, having a better understanding of what it is, why, the statutes behind it, and seeing the understanding and value to that, not to mention the legality of it. So really starting to bring on a lot of partners statewide. So
Micah,
all those things are trending up. Go ahead, Al.
Micah, Duval County, has that shown an increase?
Duval County, my apologies. I thought I threw Duval right there. We're at 310, and that is holding steady right now.
Okay.
But that has been an increase year over year.
I bring that up because Pasco, Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Duval County all have the highest rates of opioid overdose death
Yes.
in Florida as of 2022. The new numbers for 23 will be coming out in probably December of this year. Okay.
And yeah. So that's so in that neck of the woods, that has been where the balloon has squeezed, if you will, where we're seeing reductions in numbers here. We're seeing them increase on the West Coast, unfortunately, but we have some great partners over there that are doing good work as well. But if you look at the year over year, we are looking, month over month. We do have a slight decrease, but that's because we did revoke a certification. And so we have a decrease in beds of June or July. But that's because, guess what, everybody's doing their job between DCF, FAR, our friends here on this committee as well, and the state's attorney's office. We're monitoring, we're taking those grievances and incidents seriously. And if we cannot get them to come into compliance, we are removing and revoking certifications. I just want to give a quick update on the, speaking of overdoses in housing. And we look here, fortunately, it's not, any overdose is one too many. But Melbourne had 1, but no deaths. Tampa, 2, no deaths. West Palm Beach, 2 overdoses, no deaths reported. But we look south into Broward County, Oakland Park had 2 overdoses. Mind you, this is in FAR certified houses where we did receive those incident reports, of course. Pompano, there seemed to be some sort of spike. We had 8 overdoses and 4 deaths in Pompano. So looking at what sort of trends are happening in Pompano down in Deerfield, and keeping good contact with our friends at Broward Sheriff's Office, as well as the CRT down there. Rockledge, we had 1 overdose and 1 death. And in St. Petersburg, we had 1 overdose, no death. So unfortunately, we lost 5 lives over the last month. But again, the trend continues to hold steady, if not down. And we are looking close. Anytime we see a spike, we obviously look at the program and look at all kinds of environmental factors. So, again, really good communications with our partners down in Broward on this stuff.
Okay.
And Al, I had one more thing. Well, I guess just the state capacity. I mean, we talk about it all the time, but since this big inception, we are looking at a tremendous increase over the past, and since January overall this year, an over 0.6% increase in available beds for certified housing.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions? Raise your hand. Any comments?
Terry Shapiro.
Terry Shapiro, go ahead.
Micah, thank you. Great report. Appreciate all the great work you're doing over there. I'm glad you're there. When you talk about a house getting losing their certification,
yes.
What happens after that? I mean, they lose their certifications revoked, and then how do we know that they're not continuing to operate as a uncertified house?
So we actually go out. We've actually gone out and observed not only the program, but we also make sure that the Florida Certification Board and DCF are all notified of that revocation, and any other authorities. For example, if we have a community that you're required for Saartf certification to operate in that municipality, they are also made aware. And then we'll handle it. If they continue to operate, we'll take those next steps. But basically, once they have been revoked, there's really no path for them to continue to operate, especially under the eyes of DCF and any other oversight.
Terry,
Yeah.
let me expand on the answer, if you don't mind, Micah.
Sure.
The key here is the state of Florida has a voluntary certification program, but it becomes mandatory if there's any relationship with the treatment provider.
Right.
So, in other words, whatever recovery residence loses its certification, they can refer or accept referrals from a treatment provider. That violates the law and is actually a crime if they do that. The second thing is, as Micah brought up, is there are municipalities that have adopted ordinances that require, in order to be a permitted use within the jurisdiction, within the municipality, that the residence has to be certified. So if they lose their certification, Micah mentioned, then code enforcement takes over if there are more unrelated adults living at that house than are allowable under their zoning codes. So there's various things, but if you're, if you've got a house in Alachua County and you're not dealing at all, it's a level 1, and you're not dealing at all with accepting or referring to treatment providers, and there's no ordinance in place that requires it. If you have fewer than maximum number of unrelateds, but then, if you have more than that, then you may run afoul of the local zoning code there. But otherwise, you're able to operate as a freestanding house. Make sense, Gary?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Al. Thanks, Al.
Okay.
Thanks,
Any other hands up?
Thanks, Al.
I'm sorry, Micah, did you have something else?
That's it for this report. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. And let's move on to, oh, by the way, Micah, I do have a question. So
Yes.
if I'm looking at the numbers
Yes.
up here, it would appear that about 2/3 of the certified beds in the state of Florida are levels 1, 2, and 3. Would that be?
That is correct.
Okay. And then the level 4 beds, which would be mostly the day-night programs, would be the 30 some odd percent.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And I think in Palm Beach County, if I looked at those numbers, I think that I don't know. I thought that in here they're a little heavier on the level 4s, if I'm not mistaken. But okay, just wanted to ask that question.
And we are heavier.
Here it is.
We are heavier in level 4s in Palm Beach County. Yes.
Yeah. So it's probably around closer to like 45% or something.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you. Okay, now let's move on to Oxford House update. Michael, you have an update for us?
Absolutely. Let's see here. Thank you, Al. Michael McKeo, Regional Manager for Oxford House in Florida. Currently, we've had a bit of growth over the past couple months. We're at 212 houses throughout the state, 123 men's houses, 28 women's houses, 42 women and children's houses, and now at 5 men and children's houses. Some new areas that we've been opening up recently. We've had one overdose since our last meeting. It was a non-fatal overdose in Broward County. So Oxford houses in Florida are thriving. Numerous training events and unity events are held throughout the state regularly, with ongoing establishment of new Oxford houses. The OHI staff are dedicated to properly teaching the Oxford House model to maintain the quality recovery environments within our houses. We've grown to what we call a chapter. It's basically a board of our membership in a specific area. It's a voluntary service position. And so we have 27 of those chapters across our state now, which is a very good thing to provide support for our houses. And then we have above that our state association with a regular attendance of around 100 people. And it's really a pretty amazing thing. And they are able to do a lot of things very quickly and be able to fund things and do fun things. And so there's a lot that goes into all of that. And then a lot of our emphasis over the past few months has been getting prepared for our upcoming World Convention. We're planning on sending about 370 of our members and then an additional 30 staff and some outside people as well. And so we've raised over $300,000 for that. And then we're also the host state as it's in Orlando this year. And so our state association has formed a host committee, again, comprised of our membership in voluntary service positions. And they've raised over $100,000 in order to hold that event. And they're kind of in charge of some different aspects of the convention, the golf tournament, the pool party, running the hospitality suites, and just really making sure that the convention goes smoothly as far as these kind of outside of tacked on events as part of the convention. If anybody that participates in this meeting would like to attend, come check it out. Maybe you just want to come for the day Saturday or whatever have you. It's going to be October 3rd through the 6th at Shingle Creek in Orlando. Just please reach out to me and we'll see if we can't get you out there. My contact information and Lori's, our Director of National Field Services. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out whenever you want. That's all I got.
Any comments or questions? Hey, Michael, this is my recurring question because I always forget. When did the first Oxford House open? Wasn't it just a few years ago?
So yeah, March of 2019. I opened it myself in Tallahassee, and now we're at 212 today.
You're talking about in Florida, Al. That was your question, right?
In Florida. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. That's fantastic, Michael. And you know what? I did a little bit of math here. And Florida currently has 11,408 either certified or Oxford House beds. There's no other state that comes within a mile of Florida. Congratulations on the job, Micah, you and the folks at FAR, and Michael, you and the folks at Oxford House. You save lives. You're really doing a great job, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to, okay, a little introduction and caveat. The final statewide study was completed a week ago. It was sent out to everybody that is on our mailing. Well, anybody who's here probably got a copy. Yeah, it's 198 pages or something. So yeah, the point of the exercise now is I've got Dan Lauber, the author of the study, who's going to kind of give a thumbnail of legislation, you know, what what we need to do in Florida, at least to comply with the Fair Housing Amendments Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. We will be, all, because I'm going to start writing. I'm going to ask all of you, anybody who wants to contribute and send suggested changes to Chapter 419 or suggested legislative changes, including a zoning template, to send it to me. We're not going to do any of that today. We don't have any language. We don't, there is, not everybody is in agreement with the study, especially with regard to level 4 housing in multifamily districts, and specifically the spacing limitations. But by and large, when you look at this study and when you see what the ultimate goal is, which is to have recovery residences and other residences that house disabled people, to have these houses be permitted use in local jurisdictions. Because right now, it's not a permitted use, and anybody who wants to open up a house, and of course, Dan is going to expand on this, but anybody who wants to open up a residence that, for example, exceeds the cap of unrelated individuals for that jurisdiction, they've got to go through the tortures of the dam. They've got to get a special use, so they've got to get, they're not permitted, and so they've got to go through the whole process. And the key to what we're trying to achieve here, whether it's perfect or it's imperfect, is to be able to open up the door so that houses can be opened up as permitted uses within the state of Florida, and we can have a template for the entire state. So local governments can adopt this, and we can move the bar forward. So anyway, again, this is just, I've asked Dan to come here and basically just give a thumbnail as to where we're tending in terms of 419 and other legislation. And in the future, we're going to be hunkering down, and I don't know if we'll have anything for the 25 legislative session. I hope so. But clearly in the next year and a half, I'm hoping to have a template statute to replace 419 and also to give guidance to municipalities. Anyway, Dan, that was a long-winded introduction. Dan Lauber from Illinois, author of the statewide study here in Florida, commissioned by the legislature. Sure. Dan?
Thanks. And please note in the acknowledgments, there were a whole lot of people who contributed to the study, including Al and Terrell and others here, and their contributions are greatly appreciated. It could not have been completed without them, especially in the short time frame we had. I'm going to cover two areas. One, while we can talk about legislative recommendations, you got to understand and be aware of the shortcomings of the current legislation. Otherwise, the recommendations don't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. I also want to add that page 49 of the study had a typo on it that has been fixed, and Al will be sending out or Marianne will be sending out the corrected page. The study itself is nuanced, it's complex, it's thorough, and I encourage anyone who really wants to understand this and who wants to really cure insomnia to read the whole thing. The guiding rule we have in all of this comes from the case law. The Fair Housing Act, when it was amended in '88 to add people with disabilities, requires that cities make a reasonable accommodation in their zoning regulations, rules, and practices. And that those based on the court decisions, take them all together. Those have to be fact-based. They can't be based on myths or misperceptions of the nature of people with disabilities. And they have to be intended to not only achieve a legitimate government interest, and that includes protecting the people with the disabilities from scam artists, exploitation, mistreatment, inadequate care, etc. It needs to be intended to achieve legitimate government interest. It also includes maintaining a residential character of the neighborhood because that's necessary for community residences, of which recovery residences are a subset to be successful at their core purposes of normalization and community integration and emulating a family. So it's got to not only be intended to achieve a legitimate government interest, but it actually has to achieve it. None of these legal myths or legal fictions that unfortunately the Supreme Court over the decades has often engaged in. But it's really got to achieve it, and you've got to use the least drastic means needed to actually achieve that legitimate interest. And that's one of the reasons why requiring all the proposals for community residences, including recovery residences, to go through a special use permit or conditional use permit process, I would say the case law is pretty clear that is not legitimate. Next slide. We've got to look first, before we go into the legislative recommendations, the flaws in 419.001. And it's important to keep this in perspective. Most of this statutory provision was adopted before the case law matured. So, just between us, it's basically the result of some lobbying by advocates, all sorts of compromises, but it lacks a lot of legitimate basis, in fact, for its provisions. And there is a need to remove from 419.001 the unjustifiable provisions that expose both the state of Florida and those cities that rely on the state statute alone to regulate community residences. It exposes them to quite a bit of legal liability, and there's a need to also encompass the full array of housing arrangements for people with disabilities and the full array of disabilities. So among the weaknesses in the current laws, it covers some community residences for some people with some disabilities. Also, there's simply no justifiable or legal basis for the current excessive 1,200-foot spacing distance between community residences. I can say that with some degree of confidence, having with Frank Bangs Jr. and Jack Noble come up with the whole idea of spacing distances between community residences to be permitted uses. And I'll get to another point about that in just a minute. But this was 50 years ago, literally exactly 50 years ago, when I was a young pup and a very precocious 6-year-old. And we were looking for a way, after surveying for the American Society of Planning officials, hundreds of cities, to find out how they regulated group homes and halfway houses, and discovering that they tended to require a special use permit. We were trying to find a way to assure that we could be confident that if you didn't have them clustering together and you required a license or certification, that we could be assured they would be able to work. And they wouldn't alter the character of the neighborhood by putting a whole lot together and creating an institutional atmosphere. And they would be sufficiently separated so that they would be able to indeed integrate in the community and use neighbors as role models. Next slide. One of the problems, among the many problems with 419, is it doesn't provide to make a reasonable accommodation to locate within the applicable spacing distance. And the study goes to considerable lengths to explain the circumstances when you should be allowing a home to locate within the spacing distance of another existing community residence or recovery community. There's quite a bit in there on that. I encourage you to read that. There are illustrations of what clustering and concentrations are. And there's some real world examples in there that help put some meat on the bones. But one of the big fatal flaws in the state statute is that it doesn't allow locating within the spacing distance. It also, unfortunately, apply spacing and other zoning requirements even when the community residence constitutes a family under local zoning or there's no definition of family. And as I'll get to very, very shortly, if a community residence complies with the local zoning definition of family, as Al was alluding, you can't regulate it through zoning. It also makes this assertion that's right out of Fantasyland, which I guess is appropriate given Disney World being in Florida, that located within 500 feet of a single family zone creates a concentration and substantially alters the nature and character of an area. I have no idea how they came up with that years ago, but there's just no basis for that whatsoever. It also divides zoning treatment of community residences based on the number of occupants rather than the length of tenancy. That's, you know, that's something we did 50 years ago when we were first trying to figure out how to regulate these community residences. And we looked to the fire codes, which made a break between up to 8 people and 9 or more in how they treated residences. And that's what we followed. It didn't take too long after that to realize that these should be how you divide them into family and transitional community residences, which affects where they're allowed as of right, as permitted use, should be based on the characteristics of how the homes perform, whether it's a short-term living arrangement, which now I believe less than 6 months, which make it a transitional community residence, or a longer-term arrangement of 6 months or more, which would make it a family community residence. The state statute does not explicitly provide for Oxford houses or recovery communities, which is also something that needs to be corrected. Next slide. So coming back, just so you get the basic framework, the fundamental flaw in the statewide and local zoning is it's ignoring the local zoning, local jurisdiction zoning definition of family. And the basic legal principle is that if you're treating a group of people with disabilities differently than the same size group of people without disabilities, the law is discriminatory on its face. So if the zoning code doesn't define family at all, then if you impose zoning restrictions on community residences for people with disabilities, you are treating them differently than the same size group of people without disabilities. You could have 8 or 9 people living together, but you won't let 8 or 9 people with disabilities live together unless you make them go through a special use permit, or if you apply a spacing or licensing requirement, you're treating them differently. But if you've got the same situation, if you have a definition of family that allows any number of unrelated people to live together as a single housekeeping unit, as a family, same situation. But most jurisdictions in this country, and the Supreme Court sanctioned this way back in the Belterre decision in the early 1970s, an opinion written by William O. Douglas, hardly a conservative justice, that if the community residence fits within the cap on the number of unrelated individuals that constitutes a family or a household, then those that fit within the cap have to be treated the same as any other family. You can't require spacing. You can't require licensing or certification. You don't count them towards spacing. But if you exceed that cap, nobody's allowed to live together. You can't have, say you have a definition of family that allows 4 unrelated people to live together. 5 students can't go and live together in an apartment or a house. 6 or 7 people can't go and live together in a dwelling unit. This is where we're making the reasonable accommodation, where we are enabling community residences for people with disabilities that would exceed this cap of 4 in this example to live together, something that people without disabilities are not allowed to do. Hence, this is not discriminatory. It's making a reasonable accommodation, giving people with disabilities, as some outlier court cases have said, giving them an advantage, extra benefit. What it is leveling the playing field to enable them because of their disabilities need a group living environment to actually live in one. So that's, a key distinction that often gets forgotten. And I wanted to make sure that everyone here was aware of it. Next slide. The study didn't. Next slide, please. Thank you. The study didn't just look, though, at the state, it also looked a little bit at the local zoning. And if we're not able to get cities to correct these flaws in their local zoning, then the state is a remedy. So we have the first problem that we were talking about, same with the state, where they don't take into account the definition of family, and they actually require spacing or licensing for group homes that meet their definition of family. That's verboten. Case law is abundantly clear on that, even before the Fair Housing Act was amended in '88. They also have been failing to make a reasonable accommodation to let community residences that exceed the cap on unrelated individuals that constitutes a family. So they're not even allowing group homes that exceed 4 people in their jurisdictions. There's some in Florida. There's a lot more elsewhere in the country. It's absurd, but they're getting away with doing that because no one has sued them yet. They're also failing to provide a case-by-case review process to make a reasonable accommodation to allow community residents to locate within a spacing distance. The spacing distance is required to be a permitted use. They are failing to allow for community residences for which no license or certification is available. A perfect example, and I've represented a few of these, group homes for people with eating disorders, which tend to be young women with anorexia, etc. Perhaps the most threatening group on earth. We actually had a case in Naperville, Illinois, where the neighbors were afraid if they were baked brownies, the girls from the home would descend upon them to steal their brownies. I'm not making it up. And there's most cities are not allowing more than 10 occupants in a group home, and they aren't allowing for a case-by-case review to allow more than 10 occupants in the community residence. And they've got to do that. Next slide. When they're deciding a case-by-case review, they're not employing narrowly tailored standards based on the reasons why the review is required. Instead, they're applying the same old standards for all other conditional uses. And that runs afoul of our basic principle of using the least drastic means necessary to achieve legitimate government interests. And you've got to adopt narrowly crafted standards that are based on the reason why you're requiring the conditional use or type 2 exemption in Palm Beach County or special exception. There are also are completely excluding transitional community residences from strict single-family districts where it's strictly single-family detached homes, no duplexes, no townhouses allowed. They're also requiring a case-by-case review for any community residence or recovery community located in a residential zoning district, instead of having it set up that they would be permitted uses if a rational spacing distance were met and they have certification or licensing. Some are imposing unjustifiably excessive spacing distances. Some are misinterpreting the whole function of spacing distances. They won't allow exceptions. As Jeffrey has pointed out, they had a planned zoning board in Pompano Beach that, until they woke up, was saying, hey, we adopted a spacing distance. We spent money on a study. We don't have to allow any exceptions. And of course, that's dead wrong. And the study, again, gives you quite a bit of guidance on how to evaluate requests to locate within a spacing distance. They are, like the state statute, categorizing community residences based on the number of residents rather than as family or transitional. And they're completely excluding recovery communities from districts where multifamily housing is allowed. All this leads up to these legislative recommendations. Next slide. And these are made a little simpler to read than in the study. In the short run, it's really important to repeal the provisions in 419-001 that run afoul of the Fair Housing Act and replace them with provisions that comply with the act, which is pretty obvious. There is a need to amend the statewide statute and for localities to follow the case law that requires treating the community residence that fits within a jurisdiction zoning definition of family the same as any other family. Fundamental thing. In the longer run, There's a need to amend the statewide and local zoning for community residences to treat community residences for the same for all types of disabilities. There's not a different zoning standard for community residences for people with mental illness as opposed to developmental disabilities or to substance use disorder. And there's really a need to replace 419-001 in its entirety with a comprehensive, up-to-date, balanced zoning approach as recommended in Chapter 6 of the report to bring it into full compliance with the Fair Housing Amendments Act. Cities and the state should adopt the functional definitions modeled on what we provide at the end of Chapter 3 that really spell out what these uses are supposed to be. So it prevents, let's say, scam artists like those that are flourishing right now in Arizona, who are setting up flop houses claiming to be recovery communities, and there that state's administrative bureaucracy is not quite able to, they're not willing to deal with the problem there. Next slide. There's a need both at the state and local level to adopt narrowly crafted standards based on the reasons why case-by-case review is warranted. And some of those standards are explained a bit in the study. And they need to locally and at the state level allow case-by-case review to locate within the spacing distance that's used to be a permitted use. You need to recognize the spacing distance is flexible and exceptions should be made when the standards are met. There's also a need at the local and the state level to allow, when no license, the state should be, I should have put this on the slide, the state should be requiring a license or certification for all community residences for people with disabilities, recovery residences, as well as recovery communities and all the different group homes. But you need, if you do that, which I think is rather critical as the study explains, you need to provide a mechanism to review on a case-by-case basis those for which there is no license or certification available. And you need to provide a mechanism both in state legislation and at the local level to allow a case-by-case review to allow more than 12 people in a community residence, which is right now what we're recommending as the cap to be a permitted use. Next slide. We also need both at the state and local levels to replace categories based on the number of residents with the functional definitions based on the length of tenancy that we've described, and to allow transitional community residences in single-family districts when narrowly written standards are met. We also need to define and allow recovery communities, which is defined in great detail in the study in Chapter 3, as permitted uses in all districts for multifamily housing as a permitted use, subject to spacing and certification. And this was not mentioned in the flaws earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning here, as mentioned in Chapter 8. The state statutes dealing with fire safety codes and building codes need to be amended. They've made an exception from some fire safety requirements like sprinkler systems if the home is recovery residence is certified. This needs to be expanded to cover all community residences as well as recovery communities, to exempt those where the residents are capable of self-evacuation in an emergency from requirements to put in a sprinkler system or direct fire alarm system to the fire house. Those are changes that are needed, and that's frankly something that could be done pretty easily now. The rest of the slides really don't need to be shown here unless you may have some questions that may warrant showing some of the other slides, but these are the recommendations. The other slides that I have on here as a contingency describe the zoning process as it should exist. So I'll be happy to take any questions, see if I can confuse and confound you a little bit further. And I really do want to emphasize it's really worth your while to spend some time with the study. I wouldn't recommend doing it in one sitting.
Right.
And you'll see why there's a basis for all of this, as all spelled out in the study in excruciatingly painful detail.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you very much for your dedication, because I know that you were under the gun with deadlines. You didn't even get the contract until February, where the money was approved the previous June. So it really cut your time short. You got it done. Jeff Lynn, you had your hand up. So go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Al. It's just a general question, Al, about what is the anticipated overall process for this? Like from a time, like we had a timeline, study adoption, like then what happens and then what happens, and is the point of the study ultimately to give the background justification for amendments to Chapter 419, or are they on different tracks?
Well, everything is fluid. As I said before, Dan gave us the short form on the problems with 419. My conception is that we would tackle 419, ultimately try to hammer out a model zoning ordinance that could be adopted in legislation to give municipalities and counties a template that they can use. The carrot is certification. The stick is there's a give and take within the communities, and my hope is over time that this can be perfected, and when communities around the state can see that, and of course we're centric here for recovery residences. I mean, we have to talk about all residences that house people with disabilities in order to have this make sense on a broad scale. But our primary focus here is, how do we attack the crisis, the opioid crisis, but also the substance use disorder crisis and all the deaths and all the lives that are being taken on the one hand, and on the other hand, how do we convince local government that this is a good thing for them as well? I think one of the things about having 11,408 beds that are certified in the state of Florida is each and every one of those beds takes a brick out from underneath the castle that local governments have built around themselves, because they see ghosts and they see goblins. And the more good neighbors that there are at recovery residences and recovery communities, and that would be also, it would ease the tension between the residents of communities and residents of recovery residences. So the long-winded, but the shorthand is there is no timeline per se. Now we start trying to write legislation. Now, I know that there are competing thoughts with regard to, and I said specifically with regard to level 4. And let's all keep our ears open and our minds open to see how we can fit this in. One thing, for example, is a recovery community can be an apartment building. It doesn't necessarily have to be duplexes, 7 or 8 or 10 or 12, duplexes in 2 blocks. That's a hard sell, but I know economically that's a concern for those who are running programs that include level 4 housing. So we have to have these discussions. The study is to kind of give us a bit of a roadmap as to what the case law has said, what we can with authority claim to be the law, but how we write this and what we include is going to be something that we, my office will be doing with the help of each and every individual out in the community and out in the field that wants to write and give us ideas. Does that make sense and answer your question, Jeff?
Not really, but I understand why it can't.
Well, I think you asked what the process is going to be, and the process is going to be, we got to start shredding.
Yeah, I'm just, I was, and I'm not trying to be glib or anything. I'm just trying to understand the purpose of the study. Why are we spending all this money on the study for I'm not questioning it. I'm just, what was the intended outcome of it then? What was the purpose of it? If it's just to be there and so have a basis, that's fine. I just think it's like Dan's doing it. It seems to be the basis for revising chapter 419. So I didn't know those were bifurcated from each other. And again, I'm not judging or questioning. I'm just asking the question so that I can understand.
Well, I am comfortable that Dan did a great job in defining where we are within the law. I know there may be a difference of opinion on some stuff, but studies are what the studies are, and he asked for everybody to contribute, and as well as the case law is what it is. And I think the study, again, you may disagree. I think the study was needed before we could start the process.
That's my question. Remember when we were in task force, everyone thinks that this was a task force issue. It wasn't. It was an appropriation that you and others got. It was amazing. And I was never really completely understanding what the purpose of the study was to prove out. Um, so like, why are we spending this money and what was the purpose of it? So you're understandably saying, I might have questions about it. I'm not talking about the study at all as if I never read it. I'm just trying to think of, we spent money on a study for a purpose, and that purpose is fill in the blank. And I'm still trying to figure out what that purpose is, just so I can know for my purposes where to focus my time.
Okay,
that's it.
The purpose, okay, in a nutshell, the purpose is to have the underlying information to be able to put forth a reasonable, defensible legislation, and to create a template throughout Florida for local governments to be able to adopt a zoning scheme that allows for permitted use, which right now we don't have.
Right. So are we doing that in 419? That's what I'm trying to understand, because we're the emails put those two things together. So I'm hearing those are separate. Are they not together, or are they separate?
419 would be the general, the things that are violate federal law need to be changed.
Right.
There will have to be another, whether it's in 419 or somewhere else, there will have to be another section that would be the recommended or template ordinance.
Okay. But for right now, we're assuming that's going to go in 419 unless we hear otherwise.
The 419 is the general.
Right. I mean, say this is where this would go, though, right? Instead of 397, it would go in 419 or some other places. We're trying to create a general statewide community residence. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at it as we need to gut and replace 419. I just want to make, because you said, or someone said, oh, it's different. I'm like, well, no, it should be 419 is the place really where Dan's work should go into. And that's why I just wanted to know if there was a difference of opinion on that, just why I was curious. That's all.
I don't know 419, but it's just that we're talking about two different things. I get it, Jeff. I'm sorry. I didn't understand that what you were asking until you just now. There are two different things. One is the general, which is 419.01.
Yeah.
And there is the specific, which would be trying to craft a template ordinance that is recommended for every single municipality and every single county, which defines reasonable accommodation, which defines the permitted use, which allows, which right now it's like everybody is doing this individually, every part in every local government. And I think most of them are doing it wrong, even when they have an ordinance that's similar to the template that could be devised from this, but they're still reading it wrong. They're not. The reasonable accommodation is a joke right now in many municipalities, as you well know.
Yeah. Well, Al, let me ask, because I see that other lawyers have their hands raised, like Tom keeps trying to raise his hand. Baird, I want to just ask one follow-up question, then I'll be quiet. So is the proposed model ordinances, is that going to be part of a statute, or is that going to be more like something circulated amongst the League of Cities kind of thing?
Don't have an answer for you. If
Okay,
I don't
that's
know
fine.
if it's ever, I don't know if it's ever been done in this format in legislation. I
Yeah, I
know.
was just wondering if you have it, how it's going to be disseminated. That was my only question, but I'm good. We don't know yet, and that's fine. That's
Okay.
good.
All right,
Okay.
Terry, you have your hand up.
And Tom also wants to, Tom doesn't know how to raise his hand on Zoom, so he keeps raising his hand. Just letting you
Go
know.
ahead. Go ahead, Tom. I'll come in after you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do know how to raise my hand, but I was trying to break up Jeff's train of thought. So what plans are you making for inclusion of the cities in the dialogue about this model legislation that you're going to want them to adopt? And what plan do you have in terms of disseminating the study that Dan's prepared to cities so that they can understand the context of what you're proposing? Because it seems to me you want to include them early rather than wait till it gets to Tallahassee and have the League of Cities saying, whoa, Nelly.
Absolutely, Tom. I'm going to let Susan and Terrell Pyburn answer your question. First with Susan.
Okay, hello everyone. Susan Ramsey here. FAR has a zoning committee, which is meeting essentially every other Thursday. If there's anybody here who would like to be on that committee, I'm the chair, so I get to decide. So let me know. Terrell is on our committee, and along with a number of other people, including Dan, Nikki Soda, Jeff Lynn. There's other people. And it's certainly the direction of the zoning committee to sort of get into the meat and bones of this and to see how we can be helpful to the task force and to anybody else who are, have an interest in this type of legislation. So Tom, you can come to the meeting too if you want. I'm happy to invite you. I just realized everybody's busy, but that is the purpose. We're trying to spread, FAR is trying to spread this information and to get as many insights and input as possible, because I understand the legal issues, or well, let me say I don't understand what I don't understand, but I think that it's been extremely useful to have these continuing conversations to address all stakeholders, right? Whether you are a recovery residence operator, or whether you are, working for a particular municipality or whatever. We need everybody's input because it's not that easy to work all this through, but I couldn't agree more. In order to do this successfully, we need to have as many people who are going to have something to say at the table as possible. So I am saying that and welcoming anybody who wishes to participate. They are welcome to come. It isn't that exciting. It's only 1 hour. So, before you say, oh my God, not another committee, consider it 1 hour every other Thursday for the foreseeable future. That's it. Done.
Has any contact been made with Palm Beach County League of Cities in regards to this, or?
Not directly.
I wouldn't. I represent 3 cities in Palm Beach County. I wouldn't have known about this if I had not attended today's task force meeting.
Right.
And
well, now you know. So come on board.
Tom, by the way, we have missed you.
Not about just me being on board. It's about 37 other 38 cities in Palm Beach County.
Tom, the reason the study, and again, this dovetails on Jeff's question, the study needed to be done before the conversation can really begin. Right. There is no, since 2016, on issues like this, especially with the legislators that have been carrying, our water in all of these issues, they're not in favor of preemption. And we've never been that way. We've always included the League of Cities and the Association of Counties. you know, they will certainly be included statewide as well as locally. But we have to have something to start with. You're absolutely correct. None of our legislation can ever go up to Tallahassee without having eyes on it from the League of Cities and the Association of Counties. So that's going to continue. I know, Terry, you've had your hand up, been very patient. And then Terrell, I don't know if you wanted to speak to these issues, but I'd like you to hear from you as well. So Terry?
I just wanted to thank Dan. His report gives me great hope for Dade County, which other than the great work that Michael and Lori and Oxford Houses are doing in Dade County and Miami, we have no community housing, no transitional housing at all. People are asking for it all the time, and people have been fearful of even attempting. The one guy I know that did several years ago had to use Greenberg Tarig to fight it, and this is extremely helpful. I understood every word you said, Dan, because you speak with the same Chicago accent that I do. So appreciate it very much.
And to dovetail on that, Terry, I'm looking at the certified recovery residences in Miami-Dade. We've got 23 23 units with only 182 beds. Are you kidding me? Was it 3.5 million people in Miami-Dade? Yeah. So I feel your pain, and this hopefully this can help. I believe it will. Terrell?
Absolutely, 100%.
Thank you, Al. So I just wanted to point out for Tom's benefit and anybody else here who is representing any cities, I did have a conversation with the Florida League of Cities, and they said that, once we have some draft legislation, we could send it around basically for the legislative committee meeting that they have usually in the fall. I don't know if we'll have a draft ready by then. I think that the overall intent is that even if we put a draft together, it may not necessarily pass this year. It might take another year before we get it right. So nobody's trying to cram this down any of the city's throats or any of the operators' throats or any of the county's throats or the state's throat or anything like that. What we're trying to do is reach some kind of resolution where there is a clear way of evaluating homes for all types of people with disabilities. And the intent, again, is to educate the public generally, elected officials, and the operators, as well as to provide some level of consistency statewide so that folks know what to expect when going from one jurisdiction to another. And the hope is to create some kind of template that will work for everyone. But again, I have been in contact with the Florida League of Cities, and they are fully expecting us to send something to them and to kind of shop it around with their folks through the legislative committee process. As far as the Florida Association of Counties, I haven't really reached out to them yet because I don't really have a good contact there, and I don't have anything to offer yet, but I'm sure that we'll get there. And I know Richard Radcliffe has been aware, at least peripherally, of this for a while because going back some time when we were looking at funding the study through the Proviso, I know he was aware of it then. But these things have taken a long time. As you're aware, Tom, we've been talking about this study probably for several years now, and it took a while to get the funding and then ultimately to get it completed. So this is just, as Al pointed out, kind of step one. But by all means, if you have suggestions, please participate and share, any thoughts that you have.
Thank you, Terrell. And do you think it's a good idea, Terrell? Specifically, I'm asking, should we send the study itself to legal in the League of City, State, and County, and also the Association of Counties? Well, I know Palm Beach County certainly has a copy of the study because they're the ones who are receiving the money for DCF and getting it over to FSU, who's then getting it over to their contract employee or contractor, Dan, which is why it took 6 months, 8 months to get the thing ratified. But, so Yeah, that's a great idea. I think we need to disseminate the study so that people can absorb it and then understand where it's coming from when we do come up with legislation. And maybe the Association of Counties or the League of Cities will come up with legislation of their own that we can work with. They may have some, I doubt it. I doubt they will, but you know, they need to be included. So Terrell, maybe we can get together and figure out who the contacts are to send it out to legal of both organizations.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Great. Dan, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I would echo what you've been saying. I think that before sending it out, we should put together a carefully crafted cover letter about the nature of the study and its purpose. One thing this study does is help put me out of business. I don't think if any city wants to pursue amending its zoning along the lines of what I've been doing with cities and counties in Florida, I don't think they need to do a full study anymore. I think just maybe an addendum to this regarding their own situation, their own maps maybe, but otherwise, I think they can rely on this study as providing the justification for their zoning and cut the cost of writing a zoning, doing the whole process by 40% or possibly even more. So it makes it much more accessible. And that's something, you know, perhaps in the context of the League of Cities, that might be worth pointing that out. I'm cautious about setting cities loose on this simply because I've seen too many, to use the technical term, screw it up. Another term I wanted to use, but the FCC won't let me use it on these Zoom calls. It's the catch to it all. It's all very nuanced and it's all a comprehensive package. I've seen cities adopt bits and pieces and they just create a mess and wind up getting themselves sued. Plus, there's another component that's very important is training. Is absolutely critical that perhaps if something does get adopted, that the League of Cities, that we get the Florida chapter of the American Planning Association involved in training the staff that will implement these ordinances, as well as any changes made to the state statute, and train their zoning boards to properly evaluate applications. That's an ongoing issue with turnover and the not fully staffed planning departments in Florida right now.
Yeah, Dan, that was timely and appropriate because you of all people know that your previous ordinances as they've developed have been taken, used in part and not in whole, applied in, and you don't have to respond to this, but applied in no way the way it was that they adopt and enforce an ordinance. And Jeff, you know, I'm aware of Jeff's. Was it Pompano Beach? I can't remember which municipality, but for them to actually say, well, we adopted this ordinance, so we didn't have to do any reasonable accommodations. I mean, that just underscores your worry, your concern about making sure not only that there's training, but there are rules that reasonable accommodation has to be considered. You know, they all know it has to be considered now. You know, adopting the ordinance doesn't mean it disappears. I mean, and so yeah, it's probably where the rubber's going to meet the road. If we can in fact move this Leviathan, you know, toward the good, it's going to have to be the full package. It can't be a piecemeal. You know, we'll adopt some of it and we won't adopt all of it. So that's the problem with sending a study out. But you know what? The study exists. It's a public record, and I think everybody needs to read it. And hopefully, you know, it will end up being for the good. I see no other hands. Thank you, Dan. I know you had an appointment, so thanks for hanging in there with us from Illinois, where you have an extra hour of sunlight from us.
Thank you all.
Move on to the next agenda item number 6. Williams is with us from the department, and we have the core program, which actually the idea for this emanated from the healthcare district's addiction stabilization unit, but it's been replicated and improved throughout the state, and it's actually coming back at us. I think we'll be hearing about that from Ann Berner next. But go ahead, Amber. It's all yours.
Thank you very much. I know Amanda Regis was going to give this presentation, but she was had to be out today. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Amber Williams. I'm the subject matter expert for the Core Network and Hospital Bridge programs for the Department of Children and Families, Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health. And today I'm going to provide an overview and status update for our coordinated opioid recovery network, both statewide and in Palm Beach. So next slide.
Thanks. Yeah, we have some recommendations for you sound-wise because you're breaking up a little bit. What would that be? Is your cell phone anywhere near where you are right now? Because it might be interfering with your audio. So if you could like move it away from you or turn it off.
Here, let me hold on one second. Is that better?
Okay, and let's advance to the next slide.
Okay. So the core network model, as all of you know, and that's referred to as CORE, expands a state-supported coordinated system of addiction care for individuals experiencing substance use disorder. So the CORE model is comprised of a multi-tiered approach that includes rescue response through EMS, stabilization through our emergency departments, and a long-term treatment through our receiving clinics. Next slide. So during fiscal year 22-23, the Department of Children and Families partnered with the Department of Health and the Agency for Healthcare Administration to implement a core network in the 12 pilot counties shown on the screen in the color teal. Next slide. In October 2023, CORE transitioned from the Florida Department of Health to the Florida Department of Children and Families. And in December 2023, an additional 17 counties were approved to initiate a CORE network. So shown on your screen in the yellow-orange color, you'll see the 17 counties that were implemented in that year. In mid-February 2024, they had a new funding allocation methodology was accepted, and from there the managing entities began to do the contracting process to secure key partners in the core networks. Next slide. In April 2024, Palm Beach was added to the list of counties to onboard, and with the addition of Palm Beach County, the core network expanded to 30 counties that make up nearly 88% of the state's population. And you know, Palm Beach was the model for the core network, so we were happy to be able to have them on board. So next slide. So we're going to look at some data that we reviewed to figure out the impact of the core network. So beginning in 2018, the number of opioid-caused deaths statewide and in the 12 core pilot counties have been gradually increasing. However, in 2022, we start to see a decline. So when comparing the 2022 opioid-caused deaths to 2021 deaths, there was a 4% decrease statewide and a 5% decrease in the core pilot counties. Next slide. So we see a similar trend with EMS responses to suspected overdoses beginning in 2018. The number of emergency medical service responses to suspected opioid-involved overdoses in Florida have been gradually increasing until 2022, where the responses began to decline. Based on the provisional data for emergency medical services through the Department of Health in 2023, there were a little over 36,000 emergency medical service responses to a suspected opioid-involved overdose statewide. This is 4,381 fewer responses to suspected opioid-involved overdoses by emergency medical services compared to 2022, marking an 11% decrease statewide. In 2023, in the 12 pilot counties, there were slightly over 15,000 emergency medical service responses to a suspected opioid-involved overdose. This is 559 fewer responses to suspected opioid-involved overdoses by emergency medical services compared to 2022, making a 3% decrease. Next slide. So on this slide, we wanted to highlight several of the 12 pilot counties that demonstrated a notable reduction in the number of emergency medical service responses to a suspected opioid-involved overdose. So in 2023 compared to the previous year, Marion County showed a 19% decrease, Pinellas County an 18% decrease, Duval County a 16% decrease. And although this data highlights a comparison of 2022 and 2023 data, and Palm Beach wasn't onboarded until this April of 2024, we wanted to show Palm Beach's baseline compared to core counties with available data. So this also shows that there's an opportunity for the core network to contribute to the downward trend in EMS responses to suspected opioid-involved overdoses. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, Palm Beach was approved to be a core county in April 2024. Since it's only been a few months, onboarding efforts are underway. Efforts are being coordinated with the managing entity, Southeast Florida Behavioral Health Network, to obtain budget updates for potential partners and to review drafted contracts with West Palm Beach Fire Department following approval from the mayor. Additionally, Palm Beach County Fire Rescue has expressed interest in participating in the core network and stated they intend to submit a proposal to the managing entity within the next week to further support their mobile integrated health program. HCA officials are proposing piloting induction protocols at 4 Palm Beach County urgent cares in areas recognized for high overdoses. The managing entity will be working on an agreement draft for the anticipated services. So as you can see, there's a lot of work being done to ensure that Palm Beach is able to accomplish key milestones, including development and implementation. And as far as next steps, the Southeast Florida Behavioral Health Network will continue to work with the key players and continue to try and reach out to get more hospitals involved as we progress through the development in Palm Beach County. So next slide. So these are some core highlights. We wanted to highlight the impact that we've observed from CORE since its inception. So between July 2022 and April 2024, CORE first responders have responded to over 18,000 calls involving individuals with opioid use disorders, administered naloxone over 19,000 overdose calls, and 9,700 patients have been seen at CORE receiving clinics. Of the 9,792 opioid use disorder patients served at CORE receiving clinics, 4,794 have received medication-assisted treatment. This accounts for 49% of opioid use disorder patients seen at a CORE receiving clinic. And just to compare to national data, according to 2022 estimates from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, 19% of adults with an opioid use disorder received medication-assisted treatment for opioid use in the past year. So Florida is heading in the right direction. Next slide. So based on the most recent data from 2021 to 2022, when compared to the national average, Florida continues to outperform in the following areas. Florida adults that experience an opioid use disorder in the past year, Florida's adult rate of substance use disorders, and I think I'm out of sync with a slide. Let's go on to our highlights, our accomplishments. So basically what we've been doing is face-to-face visits with the core networks, which have been very successful. We were able to do this with Palm Beach County. There we had fire rescue and a couple other of the partners at the table with us when that happened. The Assistant Secretary for Substance Use and Mental Health, Erica Floyd Thomas, traveled with us. And we met year one core networks and then most of year two. So these meetings are going to be continuing to help us encourage communities and find out what the future projects are that we need to participate in. Another thing that we've done is developed a QR code to utilize with the brief addiction monitor, so patients are able to complete the self-assessment in a more convenient and consistent manner. Before, it's been about people having to put the information in separately and send into ClearPoint, and we're going to cut the middleman out and be able to have that information sent and utilize, not having human error. And we are continuing to host biweekly calls with the core network to give providers the opportunity to share their experiences. We've started highlighting our year one core pilot networks because they have so many experiences to share throughout the state and help with our onboarding communities. And then the department is currently working to further expand the core network with additional counties to continue meeting the needs of individuals who benefit from our core network. Thank you for your time and attention. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Any questions? Any hands? We do have Ann Berger from this South Florida Behavioral Health Network doing specifically talking about the implementation in Palm Beach County. So I hope, Ann, that Ms. Williams didn't steal all your thunder, but
not at all, not at all.
Good. What you got for us?
So let me just share this real quick. I thought some maybe a little bit more specific information about what we're doing would be helpful. And then I'm fortunate to have Houston Park on the phone with me on the meeting today too, because I thought some of the improvements in the protocols that have been developed through the Department of Health and specifically Dr. Shepke would also be of interest. So let's see. I'm going to try and share real quick. Do you have to let me share?
You're good.
You're good.
Okay. So just real quick, there we go. I got it. Look at me. All right. All right, so just real quickly here, and Amber, thank you for going over some of the specifics, and we just wanted to kind of link together some of the expectations related to core. So first, there is a requirement around the rescue response, and that's where we've been able to engage some of our EMS providers, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But then we're also looking at not only do we want to have our hospital EDs prepared, but we also want to make sure that we know where the specially trained medical staff are to recommend the best treatment options. And that includes their ability to educate our individuals about what might be the best recovery path for them. And then we also are looking at, and a requirement of core is to be able to treat the emergent unmet health needs. So primary health care included, And then once we've got somebody engaged in services, when we look at long-term treatment, we want to make sure that we have access to all of the appropriate levels of care, and that we've got a diverse array of providers that are on board with our MAT approach, and that we are using professionals who specialize in addiction. And then lastly, the core recovery supports include having additional options and recovery supports that are available for individuals to help continue and maintain that path towards recovery and resiliency. And Amber was able to talk a little bit about the 24/7 access points, and we are looking to work with HCA on their urgent care locations, and that would include things like including appointments and a set protocol about what would be completed during their entry to an urgent care. So ideally, an individual may be working with a peer. They decide they are ready and they want to seek out treatment. We want to have that treatment immediately available and ready, so the peer could help them navigate through filling out paperwork online if that was of interest, to kind of jumpstart it. And then we're also looking to work with our Palm Beach County EMS to possibly transport individuals who've been resuscitated and had an initial MAT dose, and be able to take them to that urgent care. And because they're specially trained and have access to all the resources, would be able to be diverted from an emergency room where we could then have a warm handoff to a peer right from the urgent care clinics. And then we're very interested in being able to support the West Palm Beach EMS fire chief on a community paramedicine program for follow-up and even engagements after an overdose may have occurred. And then we talked a little bit about the essential elements. And so we've got a wide list of treatment options that we engage and educate 211 about referral sources. We use our peer network, located a number of our providers, but done primarily through Rebel Recovery, and even embracing the needle exchange program we have here in Palm Beach. And then we also have 2 methadone providers that, for those that need that gold seal level of intervention, that we've made that available. And then the whole continuum of care, including residential and outpatient services. And then lastly, we did talk a lot about the warm handoffs and how that's accomplished. And then for any other specific questions about our core program, Amanda Busbin is our Director of Network Integrity, and she would be available for anyone who's interested in following up on that. But in the meantime, I did want to ask Houston to share maybe some of the updated protocols that have evolved since the inception of CORE. So Houston, you want to talk a little about that?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address everybody here, and what an amazing ride this has been since 2015 or 2016. The efforts of this working group are very positive. The protocols for the initial dose of MAT services, particularly buprenorphine or Suboxone, have changed dramatically because of the analogs of fentanyl that we're seeing out there, where when we first started this program, our loading dosage for patients was roughly about 6 milligrams, and we're starting now at 16 milligrams. So there's a significant increase in the amount of medication that's being provided for patients, but we're getting positive success. And with that, I've worked very closely with Dr. Shupke and Dr. Phillips in the Department of Health, and we've generated a recommended protocol that communities can adopt for their fire EMS agencies that allows for pre-hospital induction, which is cutting edge pre-hospital medicine. And what this does is patients that have presented with an overdose or suspected overdose, the opportunity to be given buprenorphine pre-hospital. And this changed the mindsets of the patients, where we're not necessarily putting them in acute withdrawal, but we're putting them in a position of comfort, and they're much more receptive to receiving treatment and listening to the options that are available through a warm handoff. So I think that you're going to see that as the future. We're already seeing it across the state in a couple of different communities. Citrus County would be a really good example of that. Their pre-hospital providers, fire EMS, are giving buprenorphine in the field, and they're having tremendous success with that. The other thing is the medical direction for most of the fire rescue agencies within Palm Beach County have altered their administration of Narcan, not to be confused with that's being done by law enforcement or first aid providers, but EMS providers are going back to the original low dose of Narcan to prevent the patients from going into acute withdrawal, and really just meeting the needs of maintaining their respiratory efforts and being able to transport them to a receiving facility in a much more stable environment, again, much more receptive. And so these changes are going to make a big change in the outcome of our patients, and that's really exciting to see. And the other thing I would just like to say is that the city of West Palm is really moving forward to develop a community paramedicine program that will assist individuals being challenged with this opioid use disorder, as well as other substance use disorders. And we're also in conversation with numerous other municipalities. And then just because of the broad reach of what we're doing in Martin County, St. Lucie, and Indian River, they're all coming on board with doing similar programs. So within the region, you're going to see even greater impact. And of course, across the state, we're seeing more and more successes. So that's all I really need to say.
All right. Well, thank you, Houston. And as always, we appreciate your support and insight and your powers of persuasion.
Thanks, Houston. Yeah, I think you were one of the charter members in 2016 through the Palm Beach County Fire Rescue on the Sober Homes Task Force, or precursor, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I was fortunate to be part of that group, as well as with Dr. Shepke and Ann. So, you know, it's nice to see that our efforts are still here and working.
Any questions on the Palm Beach implementation of the core program? Okay, moving forward to the next agenda item. I've been looking forward to this because I got to tell you, just as on a personal note, Secretary Harris, Molly McKinstry, whose last day was last Friday, and all the folks at DCF have been so helpful, so incredibly helpful in working with us now to get some transparency, to give the ability of people who are in recovery or people who are loved ones of those in recovery to be able to go and get information from the department website in this space. And I'm really excited about this next presentation because it's going to be a walkthrough of the department website information upgrades. Angela Shave is with us, and I think she's going to be, and Susan, did you want to say, well, no, we'll wait till Angela does her presentation. Okay.
Well, no pressure. I hope I meet your expectations, Al. I'm Angela Shave. I am newly with the department. I started back at the end of April, and I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary over the Office of Licensing, and that falls in the Office of Quality and Innovation here at the department. So I'm going to share my screen and walk through and show you kind of where this all lives. So I'm starting at the department's homepage, which is myfloridafamilies.com. And the quickest, easiest way to get to where we're going is to go to services, then down to licensing. And then we want to go to substance use disorder licensing and regulation. And this page has a plethora of information in this space. But if you scroll down, and I'm trying to go slow so I don't give anybody whiplash as I'm scrolling down the page, down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a dashboard that has all the licensees. And this is something I believe people have seen, and we've provided some feedback has been provided that we're working on internally to continue to update and improve this dashboard. And then eventually the inspections will also live in this dashboard. But for now, they are down at the bottom of the page. And it's a long list of all the different inspections that are out there. And there's a search tool that you can search by provider name, or you can, I'll scroll down, you can page through all 120 that are out there for now. So I wanted to pull one up so you can see what they look like. So it'll tell you the provider, it'll tell you who the contact is at the location, which components or which services this provider operates and offers, some contact information about what region it's located in, the date the inspection was completed, and then the findings of that inspection. So some of them are very brief because they didn't have a lot of findings, which is a good thing. Or some of them are more detailed and they'll have information about the infractions they had that did not meet standards and what plans are the department's doing to move forward on those inspections and the deficiencies. So that's the overall of it. In the chat section, I'm going to drop an email address that if you have, as people start going into the system and looking at it, if they have any comments, questions, concerns, please feel free to share those with us so we can continue to make improvements on them. This one does not have any redactions on it, but if there are, and we're working with staff to not include client names, to use client 1, client 2, but you may see redactions in some of these inspections reports because it may have some client identifying information, which we of course want to make sure we protect. So we're working on that with our team as well to be as clean as possible, to do as minimal redactions as possible.
Angela, I've got
Yes,
a question. I know in the legislation last year, there was an effort to streamline the component licenses into providers. Has that been done?
We're in the process of making that transition to make it where the provider has one individual license and they will then be licensed for the different components, but they wouldn't have 10 different licenses. They'd have one license with all of the services listed on it. Yes.
Does that make it more user-friendly to look them up?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And I know there was another goal, I think, was to like ACA, when there are complaints or findings, are they also on the dashboard?
Can you say that again, please?
When there are complaints about a particular provider or investigations or findings, do you have them on a dashboard as well, like they do with ACA?
The complaints, I will have to get back to you, Al, on that, and so we can share with the group. I'm not sure about that yet.
Okay, I know that was
this dashboard. They're not currently here. I will have to get you the status of that as well.
Okay, thank you. And Susan, I know you wanted to comment.
I do, and I really, really, really appreciate this new way to access this information, because previously it was very, very difficult. And what would I think, and I don't know how logistically hard this is to do, but if I, request from the department with a Freedom of Information request, I can get the entire file, licensing file, which would include the application and the policies, procedures, the exact licensing, and it should also include, and it's been intermittent, whether there were complaints and what the department did in response to the complaints. And I do think that piece that Al just mentioned about the complaints and responses is very helpful to the consumer who's looking around at different options and being able to understand what it is they're looking at. But this, I applaud the department, because this is way, way better. And I'm happy to send email any any comments that I have, you know, offline beyond what I'm just saying, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate this improvement to be able to figure out basic things like, are they licensed and what are they licensed for? Because it's very confusing, you know, people having like even residential level 2, like what does that really mean to a person who's looking it up? So the more information in that regard, so the consumer looks and sees, is really, really helpful. So thank you and the rest of the department for all this hard work, because I can only imagine this was not an easy task to launch off. But again, I'll send you other comments I have offline, and because I am a user of this website. So thank
Wonderful.
you.
Well, we appreciate all your feedback, and we want to be able to provide with the best information that we possibly can. So appreciate your feedback.
My pleasure.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, thank you, Angela, and thank you for providing your email contact information. That's great. Let's move on now to John Hulick. I know he's with us to give us an update on the Palm Beach County Opioid Abatement Fund and where we are. And
hey, Al, how are you?
Never mind.
Good.
I'll go there. Go ahead.
Good to see you, Al. I don't know how we can't sit through this meeting and I at least thought to myself, we've certainly come a long way. The progress and the strides that have been made have just been incredible, and I think there's still great things to come. So in terms of process, I'm sure most of you are familiar. The Board of County Commissioners had formally established an advisory committee with the responsibility of a master plan and also responsibility with respect to opioid settlement plans. The advisory committee did approve a plan in May. As of May 21st, the plan, there was a workshop item before the Board of County Commissioners, wherein we reviewed primarily the opioid settlement recommendations within that plan. A couple major things, if we might. One is the part of the plan and recommendation of the advisory committee is that 90% of the opioid settlement dollars be dedicated toward social determinants of health, with an emphasis on housing and supports and the like, with 10% dedicated to deeper end services. Subsequent to that, at the June meeting, the advisory committee also approved a motion related to non-supplantation of opioid settlement dollars. So that motion was passed. We are rapidly approaching Recovery Month in September, so lots of activity to report regarding that, one of which is we anticipate that the board on September 17th will be voting on considering the plan to pass it at that point, hopefully. And in addition to that, considering a separate motion that I just spoke to, for that the advisory committee passed in June, which is that supplantation motion. Again, in terms of some process, anybody that listens and hopefully participates understands that the whole process starts with our subcommittees, where our emphasis and focus right now is on standards, outcomes, and measures. Creating a framework not only for opioid settlement, but the benefit of this work is also with other county dollars in the behavioral health space. So if you haven't already participated, I hope you would participate. So tomorrow and Thursday, we have blocks of subcommittee meetings. They're usually about 30 to 45 minutes long. They are all Zoom. So I again hope you can participate. What I will do, Al, if you don't mind, is upload some stuff into the chat in terms of links and PDF files, but I will also send it to you all. And if you wouldn't mind circulating that, I would appreciate it. And part of that would be a link to the plan, a link to the schedule of subcommittee meetings tomorrow. Additionally, I'm happy to report that our Recovery Month event, our annual Recovery Month event, which is our sixth annual now, is being hosted in Wellington. Again, this year we were there a couple of years ago, Wellington Town Center. So that is on Wednesday, September 25th, from 9 to 3 p.m. The title of the conference this year, or the theme, is A Journey of Resilience, Recovery, and Renewal, Palm Beach County. And I think we certainly have demonstrated a lot of that. Our keynote speaker, which many of you will be familiar with, is Dr. Julie Radlauer, who her and Marcy Runig have done significant work here in Palm Beach County in terms of consulting. They were the authors for the initial 2017 opioid response plan. They've been involved with the triennial behavioral health plan, at least dating back to 16, 19, 20. I don't believe they were involved in the 22 plan. So Julie will be focusing on social influences of mental health, and she's certainly familiar with the ins and outs of Palm Beach County. So we're looking forward to her and to other related activities. Also in that month, we'll have our usual proclamations recognizing Overdose Awareness Day on August 31st, and also the annual National Recovery Month proclamation. And I see Anita Kokovis is on the call. One of the very successful events last year, not events, a multitude of events, was through the hub, the Recovery Community Hub of Palm Beach County. They seeded, I believe it was about 26 local events throughout the month of, throughout Recovery Month. So they will be doing that again this year. Collectively, all of those events, we had over 1,500 participants, if I'm not mistaken. So September is really working out to be a really great month again. So Al, I appreciate the time to report on this. We're certainly making progress, and again, I think I know we've got greater things to come here in Palm Beach County.
Thank you, John. Any comments? Any questions? John, is when the commission is meeting, is the item available? The actual details of what they're voting on?
Yeah, so you'll see, Al, usually it's called the agenda item summary, which is available in advance of the actual meeting. So a part of it will be the plan that's already been approved and reviewed by the commissioners at the workshop item, and of course then the agenda item summary, at least in its preliminary form, does include that additional motion that passed the advisory committee regarding supplementation. So,
okay, there's no need for item 10. Item 10 is we've already dealt with that when Dan Lauber spoke. So anybody have any comments from the task force? And Terry Shapiro, you have your hand raised.
Thanks, Al. Just a quick comment about Recovery Awareness Night at the Marlins game on September 7th, where our mighty Marlins are taking on the first place and very tough Philadelphia Phillies. It's a Saturday this year. The Marlins last year allowed us to create this event on a weeknight, and we had an incredible turnout, larger than any other turnout of an event like this they've had. We had sold 1,400 tickets, and 1,088 people came out that night for the panel and the event. And a bunch of us will put that up on social media and start getting the word out there. And we hope to see a lot of you there. It's a Saturday, a lot easier to get to. Great support from them. Al, I just had a question about something that occurred again this weekend, where I had a family from Chicago reach out about their daughter looking for help. I was helping get them set up to get her into a program, into treatment. And about 2 hours later, I got a message from her that her dad had put her on a plane down here to Florida the facility that was getting her down here, they obviously got on Dr. Google. They found a place that paid for her ticket and was doing the old promissory note deal. And I'd like to report them. Are we still using the same mechanism? And is that a reportable offense?
Absolutely. Call the hotline. Ted,
Okay.
Ted, our lead investigator, Ted,
Teddy, yeah,
will talk to you.
okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments from the task force? How about the public? Anybody from the public want to chime in?
I realize, Al, that I'm kind of writing both, but wanted to reinforce what John was saying. I'm going to put the web address for the community project initiative in the chat. And if you check it out, it may have to give it a little bit of wiggle room as it's going live, but that'll have all the instructions and application process for those funds. We gave out, John said, 25 awards last year. We're doing 25 $1,000 awards this year to support Recovery Month projects. And that application is going to be live. So you can go to the website, download that. This is for nonprofit groups, also faith-based groups in the community. And we promoted a number of different events last year. A lot of community events, education events, some photography events, some art events, some great stuff with our partners at FAU. So I'm going to put the link in the chat. And like I said, if you're having an issue right now, don't worry. That's the kink to get it out, but that's the place to go. And we'll have these awards out by the middle of August so our participants can have their support because all the events happen during Recovery Month. So I'll put that link in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Terry. I'm sorry. Thank you, Micah. And anybody else have any comments? Okay.
Mike and I are the same guy, Al. It's okay. Mike and I were the same guy anyway you look at it.
I know, but
I'll look at to be considered in that rare air. I'll go with that.
Well, I love you both, but you are not the same guy. Unless you started playing bass guitar, Terry. We are out of here.
Michael started playing baseball. Yeah, he won.
We are out of here an hour early. It was thank you everybody for attending, and we'll see you in September, as they say.
See you.
So right, exactly. Take care, everyone. Have a safe rest of the summer.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
I didn't know I was unmuted when I was singing.
You sing well, though. You sing really well.